Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our careers in analytics. This is my favorite topic as y'all's career coach. And so if you do not know who I am, hi, Amanda, there you are. If you do not know who I am, my name is Sally Perez-Ramos. I am the Associate Director and Career Coach in Market Readiness, specifically working with our MBU and MSBA students. And taking over this cast for today as Sharon had some things that took a little bit more time than usual. So happy to have you all here. I'm so excited, especially as I see so many of my alums that I worked so closely with. So I want to go ahead and just kick things off first and ask our alums, right? And whoever wants to answer first, please, by all means. Let's just go ahead and have our alums that are joining us introduce themselves, the company that they're working, and basically how did you get started in this field, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start with Brett, since you're first on my list right now.
Sounds good. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, all. Am I talking to MSBA and the other?
You're talking to a mix of a whole bunch of people here.
Okay,
Wait.
got it. All right. Well, my name is Brett. I'm currently a systems engineer in modeling and simulation for Lockheed Martin. I live in Philadelphia, so the entire city is a little bit hungover right now from the Super Bowl yesterday. It was quite the scene out and about on the streets of Philly yesterday. But everybody in the office is very, very happy. I graduated from the MSBA program back in 2020. Yes, because it was the COVID graduation. With Donglin, I recognize Donglin, and and so I've been at Lockheed since June of 2020 in various roles. I've held a couple of different ones that we'll talk about a little later, but that's who I am. And hey, nice to meet everybody.
All right, we'll go ahead and kick off with Donglin.
Hey everybody, Dolan here. I graduated from the MSBA program back in 2020. I'm currently actually in my third job. So when I first got out of school, I was with Wellnessity for about a year and a half. You've probably heard of it. I think they're still based in Charlotte now, not Winston anymore, I think. After that, I went to Chewy, where I work as a business intelligence engineer on people analytics, where we specialize in we working with stakeholders from the HR department and provide analysis for them on the topics that they're interested in. And today is actually my first day on my newest company. So I'm continuing working in people analytics as a BIE at Coinbase. And today was my first day, onboarding day.
Congratulations, Donglin.
Thank you.
All right, Josh, you're next on my list.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm Josh. When I graduated the MSBA program back in 2023, I'm on my second role. But when I first left the program, I worked for a big insurer, property and casualty insurer called Chubb. Learned a lot of cool things there, but kind of wanted to switch it up and got into the current company I am at called Shrep. It's a pretty cool financial services firm. Where I'm currently working as a data scientist specializing in mainly artificial intelligence development on some of our customer applications. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Josh. Alexa, you're up.
Hey everyone, my name is Alexa Lee. So I graduated from Wake Forest MSBA program in 2018. I actually had to go back to check which class I was from because it would feel like forever. So my first job, fresh out of school was at a bank called Credit One Bank in Las Vegas. So after that, I moved to Bay Area and worked for JP Morgan. So I also work for companies like Meta, Intuit, and Bill.com. So right now I'm a senior business intelligence engineer / BI manager at Amazon. And I'm based in Bay Area.
Awesome. I know it looks gorgeous from here. Shannon, you're up.
Hello, everybody. I also had to think really hard about what year I graduated, but I graduated from Wake undergrad actually in 2017, and then I graduated from the MSBA program in 2019. Yeah, so my first job out of school, I worked for the Bank of Montreal, which is one of the big major banks in Canada. Started as a data scientist, moved into kind of more focused on like data analytics and reporting. I was there for about 3 years and have since moved to now I work for a company called FreshBooks. I'm an accounting software platform, and my current role is we're currently basically revamping all of our business intelligence reporting and data modeling.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Amanda?
Awesome. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Marchetti, and I graduated Wake undergrad in 2015 and then the MSBA program with Alexa in 2018. And after graduating, I started as a business analyst at DaVita, which is actually a kidney dialysis company located out in Denver, locations all around the country. But I'm in more the corporate side of things. And so I started as an analyst on a team that's more a strategic and reporting team that supports a lot of various teams within the company. And I'm now a senior manager on that team, managing a bunch of analysts and kind of just coordinating with a bunch of different partner teams at the company.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is Jessica here? Jessica Peters? I was so excited to see her. Okay, well, so Amanda, since you're still on my screen, I'll go ahead and let you kick this question off, okay? So what has been like what has been the most exciting or impactful project that you've worked on, and what have you learned from it?
Yeah, one was actually really cool. So a couple years ago, there's actually a Supreme Court ruling that essentially allowed employers to cut out dialysis benefits from health insurance plans, which is like pretty messed up. And so we actually did a project to try to essentially show the Congressional Budget Office that by allowing this ruling and not overturning it, you're going to increase Medicare spend because patients are going to now go to Medicare at a higher rate. This is way different than the typical type of work we do, but we work a lot with patients and their insurance and how long do they stay on it, why do they switch, why do they change, and so we were the team most with the best expertise to actually undertake this project. So it was really cool to knowing the impact that it could potentially have. And I'll say the biggest learning I had from it is more you really need to be a subject matter expert in the data and being able to talk to it from a very basic plain English level. So you really need to be good at essentially your data is going to mean nothing if you can't articulate it in a way that someone who doesn't understand the data or doesn't understand the background can pick up on. And so we've had to translate this to lawyers who have no clue what insurance is or any of this. So we've had to take it just not to only the level of people who don't understand maybe the data, but understand the business, but also people who didn't understand the business. So there's a lot of education in there as well. And so I'll say, yeah, biggest learning, which is consistent throughout all the stuff we do, is that the data means absolutely nothing if you can't communicate it well.
Amanda, you're speaking my language, man. I have a lot of my students in here, and I know they're all like, Sally has said that. Let me see. Let's go. Brett, what about you? What's been the most impactful project that you've worked on, and what have you learned from it?
Well, Lockheed is pretty much exclusively in the world of government contracting. So we're working on the scale of some of these things, I think, is always the thing that kind of blows me away, is how large mostly what I've been working on the last 3 or 4 years has been either massive radar projects or things that go out onto ships and destroyers that you can see in you can read about it in the news. Everything that's going on in the Middle East, which is obviously terrible and horrible. But seeing the software get deployed is kind of an interesting thing. And since I'm just kind of a giant science nerd as it is, getting to work on some of those really advanced kind of things that are going up into space, going out into the world of, like pushing the bounds of what technology can be, and then getting to simulate it and model it. I never really thought that that's what I was going to go into, particularly when I was in MSBA. And it was certainly a little bit more of a business focused, like data analytics world. And now here I am in the world of advanced radar systems engineering, which never really thought that's where I was going to be. But it's a good lesson that you can shift, you can change, you can adapt to new things as long as you're willing to be kind of aggressive about pursuing it.
I love that, because that is so true. It's not where you start, it's where you end up going with it, right? Josh, let's hear from you.
Sure. So I think I don't know if it's necessarily the most like impactful project that I've worked on, but I just actually wrapped up my kind of like first project since joining TREP about 3 months ago. And I took some of the learnings I had from Chubb doing a lot of NLP work, kind of like doing all this type of modeling. And it's like sometimes like when working with, I guess, certain stakeholders that aren't the most technical, they kind of want you doing all of these things and they don't even necessarily want you to know, even know why, they're making you do all these things. So going to a place, I think, that actually kind of knew what they wanted out of the technology. I think that was pretty cool. So the thing that I worked on most recently is actually like an AI search engine. So imagine like you have a user platform, for example, and a user can query for like a whole bunch of things, like manually through all these filters. But imagine instead of that, you actually like type out a particular question and start pinging those queries through natural language. And so that's one of the things that I just wrapped up working on. And one of the things that I learned was it's like, again, really got to understand the underlying data, working in a sales org at this point, collaborating with product managers, you're collaborating with whole bunch of different groups to kind of like make sense of what you need in the end. And so I think that has been a really cool experience thus far, kind of collaborating with all these different stakeholders, and even like on a smaller scale in a smaller company, but kind of delivering a real impactful product in the end. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Shannon, you want to take a stab at it?
Sure. One of the big projects that my team has spent the last year and probably will spend the next year working on is a massive data democratization project at my company. So we started as we essentially were like a startup tech company that became the size of an enterprise business that never wanted to function as an enterprise business, and therefore our data never really advanced to the point that it was structured in a proper way. And so we have a lot of kind of very legacy code and KPIs and things like that that we've essentially spent the last year or so redefining from a code perspective and a business definition perspective, as well as working on building out models that allow non-data people to actually pull their own insights from. That's the big thing. My team has spends way more time than I'd like to admit pulling data reports and graphs and things that a lot of people should be able to do themselves. And so essentially we are setting up kind of a whole world where marketing managers and product managers will be able to pull basic reports themselves, which is allowing my team to do a lot more of the advanced stuff that we are kind of the only people at the company who have the skill set for. So it's been a really interesting process in understanding how everybody looks at data differently from a different lens, and understanding like how people want to use it, trying to teach people kind of how to ask better questions than just like what was the increase in things has been Definitely a very good learning experience, but it's cool. It's cool to see kind of data from different people's eyes. And so that's been a great learning experience for me.
Thank you. Donglin?
Yeah, I work in a kind of unique field because it's HR analytics. It's not very common a department where people think about data or become data-centric department. So it's very challenging. One of the interesting projects that we're on back at Chewy is we have an employee listening system where we send out surveys internally and ask about employees' feedback on various topics. And we had a stakeholder that's our employer branding team that actually wanted to understand the difference between our internal voices and external voices and somehow how to combine them together. So collaborating with our data scientists, we were able to provide useful visualizations for our team to now understand what people are saying internally versus externally. And sometimes there are discrepancies because on other platforms, say blind, team members are likely more straightforward to be more expressing their opinions more frequently than when it's internal. People are concerned about their privacy, knowing their IDs being revealed. So there was a lot of interesting discoveries in there. And during that process, one of the biggest lessons learned is understanding user requirements, especially talking with non-technical folks. When they initially send their requirements, they want you to build a spaceship for them that solves everything, every problem in this world. But as people who understands data and data visualization, we have to dive really deep into their core requirements and sometimes engage in more fierce discussions from time to time just to boil everything down to the most important point.
Wow, that's awesome. Alexa?
Yeah, so the product I have been working on at Amazon is called Amazon One Medical, which is a primary care franchise owned by Amazon. So the functions that I own is called Senior Health, which is basically about 50% of the total revenue for Amazon One Medical. So this year, the biggest project for me is to migrate all the data and the reporting from Amazon One Medical to the entire Amazon ecosystem, because One Medical previously was a company outside of Amazon and it just got acquired like a couple years ago. So yeah, that's like the biggest thing for me this year, and I'm leading my team, mainly spending my efforts on that. So I guess the biggest learning for me is, so with healthcare system, it can be like very complicated. And you may have, for example, 10 out of 10, like SQL, Tableau, Python skills. But if you cannot get the, for example, definition or context correct of these data, like the data really means nothing to your stakeholders. So yeah, that's one thing. And another thing I guess I learned from my current role is, so previously I was mainly being on IC roles, like individual contributors. But starting this role, I became like a people manager. So it's not really just about like bringing the best of yourself. It's also about encouraging your team on, how to be the best of, themselves, and also working with like a wider range of like different stakeholders. Like previously, when I was just being at IC, the stakeholders are mainly, for example, within my scope. Right now, for example, I have to work with stakeholders outside of Amazon Healthcare, like for example, from Amazon Ads, on some like more cross-functional projects.
Awesome. All right, here's the $1 million question that I know a lot of students want to know is, especially as put yourself like thinking about it, right? Like they're interviewing and stuff right now. What are some of the technical skills, whether it's like programming, languages, tools, or methodologies, do you find the most valuable that you're doing in your work today? Pair that with what are some of the soft skills or power skills that you're also finding to be really important? Anybody who wants to start that off, please go.
I'm happy to start again if you want. We're in the process. I've interviewed probably hundreds of people at this point too, so I've got it down pat a little bit. I'll maybe start, I guess first with the technical skills. For us, I would say SQL is a big one, just because it sort of proves if you've got that skill base there, I'm pretty confident you're able to translate that to Excel or anything like that, and confident you could probably learn Tableau pretty quickly. And so I think having that knowledge base kind of gives me confidence that you've got at least the ability to learn other technical skills. I will also say Excel surprised me when I came to this job. They did things a lot like more old school, and I was like, oh, we're using Excel. The amount you can do in that is pretty amazing. And so if you can reference like any VBA skills or anything like that, is great. And their biggest plus is leveraging Python to automate anything in Excel and VBA and PowerPoint. Like that is really great too, is like using things for automation and not just data gathering is like a massive win for us. I think that can change based on company, but at least for our team, that's a really big win. And then on the soft skill side of things, it's kind of hard. I would say in an interview, don't just say I am these things that I'm about to reference, because then that just comes across as really cocky, but come up with some stories that show that you are resourceful and you are open to taking feedback and learning. The resourcefulness is a really big thing, especially our team is made up of a lot of individual contributors that collaborate a lot, but if you don't know how to do something, how are you going to figure it out? Like, that's what I want to know, is how do you figure out something when you're presented with something that is really confusing or ambiguous, or you have no direction, and knowing that like that doesn't freak you out and that you have kind of a process in your head is a really big win. And then yeah, just showing that you're really open to learning, and you can do that in a way where like if you're providing answers in an interview, you can always ask something like, is that how you would approach it? Like, how else would you shift that? Like, that's a way where you can show you're open to feedback without saying, I'm open to feedback. So those are the things that stand out most in our process, at least.
That's awesome. Does anybody else want to kind of jump in on that?
I would definitely double down on the learning one. I think that's such a big, like, I think you learn so much in undergrad and in grad school, whatever program you're in. I think the biggest shock to me was you kind of relearn everything as soon as you get a job again. And so I think that's when I'm interviewing people, that's one of the really big things, is like, show me that you know how to learn things, and show me that you want to be open to learning things, because like we are going to open the door for you to learn tons of new things. And so that willingness is huge. I think obviously we live in an ever-changing industry, and so I think being able to adapt to new tools and things like that is super important. I know specifically my team has learned very quickly that AI can do a lot of coding for you very quickly. And I mean, obviously there are positives and downsides to it, but figuring out how you can use it for you and how you can use it to learn, I think is going to really help people get ahead very quickly.
Definitely the learning thing. And I was a teacher before I was in the MSBA program, so I strongly have the opinion that you can learn just about anything once it's put in front of you, as long as you communicate well and ask the right questions of the teammates that you have available to you. So like, also with every job, you're not going to do exactly that thing in grad school. You're going to have to learn it regardless. So knowing
I don't
how
know. I'm
to ask the
checking.
right questions, hot mic. Knowing how to ask the right questions and learn those specific skills that you're going to have
I
to
think
do.
there's way less. I think we lost like 20 people.
Gavin, can you please
Oh,
put yourself on mute? Sorry, Brett.
No, it's all good. I did notice that too. There was a bunch of people that like all of a sudden just dropped from the call. I didn't know if you saw
Yeah,
it.
I saw that. It was like a good 20 people that dropped all of a sudden. I don't know what happened.
Scared
the
of
power went off across campus.
Oh, no. And the storms haven't even started. Great.
But learning, yes, learning and adapting.
Awesome. Before I go to the next question, does anybody want to kind of throw anything in there? So the next question I have is really, I think, I don't know if it was Amanda or Shannon, someone touched on it, or maybe it was even Brett, but like, I think the biggest thing, and this is something that we also hear too, is like, how do you stay updated on the latest tools and technologies and things that are happening in the world of data analytics, even so much with AI. I mean, every day we see something happening different with AI, right? So how are you staying in the know, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of jump in on that. So, I mean, that's definitely, one part of my job, right? Just because of like the nature of my work, kind of have to stay updated with the latest trends in that regard. So I think for me, there's a couple different avenues I like to go about this. I think LinkedIn and following the kind of the niche creators in that space is certainly one way of going about it. Of course, like you can find like certain newsletters as well, I think that do a good job, but I think, you're going directly to the people that kind of, actually develop is certainly one of the ways that I go about it in the AI space. And also I find that Medium articles do a pretty good job of capturing some of the new trends. Um, but yeah, that's a couple of ways that I go about it. I mean, it all moves so quick. It's like, for example, like even like let's say AI coding assistants, for example, like we had AWS come in and present their like Q developer like agentic framework and like all this like new toys to us, and then a day later, Microsoft or GitHub Copilot comes out with the same kind of agentic framework and like shows all like the similar workflows, and so it's like everything kind of just moves at a pace that I can't even describe. So just I just try to stay on top of it in those mediums, but also just being curious and kind of digging into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Anybody else? How are you staying in the know?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think LinkedIn is a great platform once you start building enough connections in there where you have connections across different industries with different levels of experiences. And one thing about LinkedIn is I think once you connect with someone, it defaults that you are following their activities. So a lot of times you will see people paying attention to their own industry, but the topic might also apply to whatever industry that you are working in. And also another tool that has been useful depending on the organization, but for my previous teams at Chewy, we constantly have external guest speakers where they specialize in more advanced data analysis, whether it's softwares or skills or just infrastructure, to give us talks on, well, at the end of the day, they're trying to sell their product, but it's still a very insightful discussion when it comes to what is at the front end, what is the hottest topic in the industry as right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Shannon.
Podcasts.
Give us
There's a
names,
lot of
Shannon.
them.
Which ones?
There's a lot of them. Analytics Power Hour is a really good one. Hub and Spoken is a good one. There's lots of them. Honestly, they all have different but good information and fun to listen to when you're commuting to work.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab before I go to the next question?
And I think besides like social medias, like a lot of things you can actually learn from the work that you are doing right now. I guess especially in tech industry and in Bay Area, like for example, the big techs, they always stay very current on like, for example, the latest technologies. So I think a more exact example when it comes to me is like, for example, when you are building data pipeline, I think the most popular tool right now is how to use dbt. And that's something that I actually learned from work. And also, for example, with Amazon, it has, like the internal AI tools that you can use to leverage, for example, how to write like product requirement documents, like how to leverage the AI to make your work more efficient. Like we have a whole bunch of like documents, learning materials, and like compliance rules on how to leverage these tools.
Thanks, Alexa. My next question is, shout out to my international students that are listening today. For my alumni who had to go through the H-1B process, could you share some, obstacles that you overcame through that and maybe even hit on a little bit about the job search. How are you successful in it? Anybody who had to go through that, please share your story.
I can probably go first. So yeah, so back then, when I was at Wake, I was my student visa. So which means like after you graduated, the clock is ticking for you. Like you had to find a job before your visa expires. So that was like a very anxious, I think, like moment for me. And during COVID, like I was actually got laid off from my first job, and back then I was on H-1B. So I mean, the clock was ticking again as well for me because I only had like 2 months to find my next job. And also when I applied for my H-1B, so I got selected, but I got like a RFE, so which means you have to submit like additional evidence to prove that like your specialty, like from your major, is suitable for your current role. So took a lot of efforts on preparing the paperwork as well back then. So when I was with Meta, so slash Facebook, so back then I think the issue is still going on that they couldn't really file perm, which is another paperwork that you have to prove to USCIS that you are the right person for this work. That's why the company is applying green card for you. So Meta actually they had some lawsuit with the Immigration Bureau and they couldn't really file perm. So back then I had to leave Meta to find like another company that can actually do my green card for me. So yeah, it's a very long story.
Yeah, I can jump in too. So I was among the unlucky ones that took me forever to get my H-1B selected. So in total, you have 3 chances. I waited until the last chance to get selected. I was at the edge of not knowing what to do. So I think my lesson learned from that experience is a couple points. One is things will work out eventually. So a lot of times it's not as smooth as probably you would expect it to be, but don't let that be a factor that affects your daily life. You know, when you are on OPT, it still matters a lot that you are doing your job well. Where there are, if you're working for a big organization, if H-1B fails, there are always other sources that you can explore. Me personally, I explored other opportunities in other countries, although I didn't end up going to different countries, but that's still an interesting experience and gave me another safety net as of right now in case anything bad happens. And the other lesson learned is, I think, from the job hunting perspective, I know one of the biggest discussions that international students tend to have is, do we say we need sponsorship or not? Do we wait until last minute to tell them we need sponsorship or not? Usually HR in big organizations understand this problem. They will be able to tell, even if you say, I don't need sponsorship, but they will be able to tell that you need sponsorship. My recommendation is just be straightforward, be frank ahead of time, so you are not wasting their time and they're not wasting your time. And to just be frank at the very beginning and have a very open-minded conversation. But for a smaller organization who are probably not familiar with the H-1B program or how OPT works, make sure you also have a small paragraph prepared to the recruiter that is on the first phone call with you to explain to them what is this program and what's the cost associated to the employer, what are their requirements, and compare OPT with H-1B. It's two so different programs, whether it's from a cost perspective or a legal perspective. A lot of HR folks probably don't 100% understand that. So make sure you have a well-worked explanation, quick explanation on your situation and your needs, and have an honest conversation. That would be my big advice. And also, last piece, make sure you have a group that supports you along the journey. It's never easy, whether it's immigration or job hunting or just studying in general. I was very lucky that I always have a group of close friends around me that support me through those difficult times. And it's very important to have, it's very lucky and important to keep that little circle around you to have and be in a supportive environment, especially during difficult times.
Thank you, Donlin. Thank you so much. Do we have anybody else who's international? That was it, right?
I'm international, but I never went through that process. I went home.
Awesome. So, I mean, talk about a little bit about that. I know that, we have some of our international students that are from Canada. So, but they're trying to stay in the US. Did you come back or are you still in Canada?
So I'm still in Canada. So I was I interviewed for a while in the States during my MSBA, and then kind of ultimately made the decision that I wanted to go home. I think the hardest thing about coming like back to Canada for me was a lot of university students in Canada get job experience because their co-op programs are so prevalent here. And so that was one big thing coming to Canada was you're all of a sudden competing with a whole bunch of people who have actual real world experience, which at the time I really didn't. But the one nice thing is like the big things that I really leaned on kind of entering in a world where like my school name wasn't as prevalent to people known and I didn't have as much job experience. I think the experiences you can get through like your practicum project, all of those types of things are really quite good ways for you to kind of showcase the work that you can do. And it really just is like about getting your foot in the door. And then like I mean, like Wake will prepare you for anything you're going to come across. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. I don't want to like take up too much of the time asking questions because I could ask y'all questions all day long that I hear from my students daily. But I definitely want to open up the floor for the students that are still participating. If you have any questions, and I see a lot of them are my students, I hope that you are going to ask any questions that you have. I mean, this is definitely the time to engage with our alums right now. So does anybody in the audience currently have a question for our alumni? And if you do, just take yourself off mute.
Yes, I want to know how you negotiate your salary.
And Donna, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Donna Liu. I'm currently in the master's program in project management, and of course it's on Zoom right now. And I was always interested in how you negotiate salary because I've never done that. Because I always just accept the salary my boss gives me.
I feel like Amanda
Honestly.
probably knows since she's interviewed hundreds of people.
Yeah.
I was just asking what I want.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's no harm in asking. There's going to be some places where, and true in some of the states now where they have the salary transparency, those bands are meant to represent what both the internal candidate can make. So like, I would say, don't expect that you're going to get close to the end of that band. You might be able to, but if you're seeing that, like, that's supposed to be for the really high performers already at the company is the high end of the band. But I would say don't accept the first, like just go back and see what you can get and just do it in a respectful way and just say like, hey, some of my colleagues, do what feels natural to you. I think like if you feel weird saying, I think my skills are worth more than this, because honestly, sometimes they could be, but another company could value less. So sometimes it's harder to go in with that argument. But if you want to say like, hey, from just my job search around, I've actually seen a lot of salaries that are maybe a little higher than this. So I was anticipating coming in closer to this number. Like, do you have any flexibility in this role? And so I would also say if they come back and say no, they don't have any, ask more about the compensation, like the plan for it. And so, for example, DaVita is very much a performance-based, like pay for performance. And so you do not have to be here a certain amount of time to get certain raises. There is opportunity for off-cycle increases. And so just ask, like, what is the pay structure like? How does my performance correlate to what I'm paid? How is this evaluated? How will I know if I'll be getting a raise? Or to say something like, if you can't give me a raise right now, can we revisit in 6 months when I have performance that I can back it? So I think there's a few ways you can go about it, but I would just say definitely ask. You're not going to lose anything. No, I've never said no to someone because they've negotiated. I might not give them the salary they want, but we've never turned down someone just because they asked for more.
Thank you.
And as I step in here as the career coach, you can always evaluate. I always direct everyone to go to like salary.com, sort of look and see, put in the job title with the location, because you kind of want to be prepared. I see what happens a lot of times now is that the employers are being very transparent up front and asking, in the first interview, what are you expecting? And you don't want to like throw some $20,000 ballpark figure that is way over salary. So you definitely need to do your research and find out what the salary would be for that role in that specific city location.
One other thing that I'll throw out there, a tidbit of advice that I got, Amanda, I'd be curious what your thoughts on this are, but I do know a lot of the time when an employer, if they ask you actually like in an interview, not just like on a form, what your salary expectations are, actually turning the question back on them and asking what the range for the salary is typically a very, like, it kind of puts it, it'll give you kind of perspective on what they're thinking, and then it kind of lets you level set your expectations, and then you don't get stuck giving a number that's like $20,000 lower than they were willing to pay you. And so it is a piece of advice that I have gotten numerous times, that it is sometimes turning the question back a little bit on them to ask like what they're willing to pay for the role is an interesting. It works. I've seen it work.
Yeah, I think that definitely can work. Luckily, because I'm in Colorado and it's a pay transparency state, like we have to like post it so they all know what the range is, which is nice. But I think it's definitely like the way you can get out of answering that directly is to say like, really what I'm mostly concerned with right now is like finding the right fit. And so I'm like want to see like what my options are, but what is your range, I think is a really great way to get around that. And I will say, just because you said something maybe to the HR person first round doesn't mean when the offer comes back you need to accept it just because you said it in the first round. Like negotiations are like it is a negotiation. It's back and forth. So like advocate for yourself. Even though on my end of it I'd be like, yeah, just say yes. That's easier for me. But yes, you should advocate for yourself.
Brett wants to know, what area of Colorado are you in?
I'm from Colorado.
Oh, nice. I just moved into Littleton, in an apartment in Littleton, Colorado. So like 10 minutes south of Denver.
Very cool.
You guys are seeing a very clean view right now. There are lots of boxes and things over to the side.
Very cool.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Just unmute yourself if you have a question.
I have a question.
All right, Patrick, let's hear it.
So I'm in the MSBA program right now, and going through the job search, I'm trying to be on the more technical side. But for those who have switched jobs, how did you approach going in? Like your first job, was it just an entry-level job and then you switched to something more in what you wanted to do? Or are you pretty hard set on getting a job in a certain industry or job title that you wanted?
I can take that one because I did the first option. I took a job in an industry or with a company that I thought was interesting, but it was my first job was in finance analytics, like program finance analytics. A little bit different than like Wall Street finance. It was mostly finance cycle stuff on these big contracts that Lockheed gets. But I did that explicitly knowing that I did not want to do finance and that I was going to use the foot in the door to leverage getting into more technical work. And that is exactly what I did. Basically 1 year in, just started poking around at what types of engineering and like harder data analytics type roles there were, and just started reaching out to all these random managers and just transitioned there eventually. So don't limit yourself to the roles that, especially if the company's kind of big, there's going to be a ton of internal opportunities.
Yeah, I guess I did the kind of the flip side of it. Didn't take the most entry level gig coming out of school. And went into an industry that I wasn't really sure I would enjoy necessarily on the insurance side of things. But it turned out I actually learned a ton from the technical perspective. Got to work with a really cool AI vendor on a couple models that really kind of that I basically took with me to interviewing with other companies. And so I was able to leverage my experience in that first role a lot into more of a role that aligned with my interests. So it's definitely possible on either side.
I kind of took it's slightly different. My kind of initial, I mean, the advice that I give to my friends looking for jobs right now is we live in a world much different from our parents, who people really don't stay at jobs for very long. So your first job does not need to be your last by any means. The first one is typically also the hardest to get. I think once you get experience and once you make connections, those are definitely the way that I know most people get jobs. But I started kind of my job search wanting originally to be in a big company, mostly because I wanted access to that like experience of people doing different jobs. The training is typically a lot more readily available at bigger companies. And I started in a more technical role and actually have moved to kind of a less technical. The actually reason I switched companies was because I wanted people management experience. So I would say like really, but I could have gone the opposite direction if I wanted to. So I would say really like try not to fret too much about the first one. It doesn't like if you hate it in a year, you can leave, and that's like very normal in a lot of industries these days, which I wouldn't encourage necessarily, but is also kind of a nice kind of peace of mind thing to remember, is that you don't have to be there for 10 years if you hate it. The first one is definitely the hardest to get.
I love that, Shannon. Thank you for saying that. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, so, because I know this is going to take 10 minutes because y'all got something to say. Picture yourself back in MSBA. What is some advice that you would give your former self as you prepare to go into the career world, as you prepare for these interviews? What is something that you would tell yourself?
I can kind of jump in here. I'd say like, maybe take a step back and like don't kind of lock in on one thing. Because I know like definitely me coming in, I do like, oh, I really, really, really want to do this particular function. Like I'm gonna do everything to possibly do this. But when in reality, as I kind of started to go through some of the coursework and learn more, um, I found a different interest, right? So it's like as you kind of like, go through some of these processes, like kind of keep an open mind and kind of realize that, what you might want to do isn't what you might actually end up doing, and you might actually enjoy doing something else. But just keeping an open mind, being curious, and yeah, that's what I have.
I would say, I guess, start trying to get comfortable with not knowing the answer. You're not going to at your new job at all. And so it's all about, as someone said it earlier, like learning to ask the right questions. And sometimes that just means learning to get comfortable asking questions. And so I would say leverage any time you've got in classes and I don't know, things like this to maybe force yourself, if it's a little outside of your comfort zone, to sort of admit that you don't know things. I know it was for me. I'm a crazy perfectionist and like I hated admitting I didn't know something. And so I would spend maybe too much time trying to figure stuff out on my own versus just asking the question. And so I think getting comfortable doing that will, one, probably help you at school as well, and two, I think set yourself up well for those uncomfortable few months where you know nothing in your first job, but you'll learn a lot.
Yeah, I will probably say something similar. I would say just get ready to learn about new stuff with an open mind. From my own personal experience, when I first started my new job, I was introduced to a certain software that at that time I did not like at all because of the user interface. Looks like it's from decades ago. However, that software itself helped me grow so much in my career, both by helping me achieving a lot of milestone projects, also by just helping me having a better understanding of data analysis and how non-technical people look at data analysis. So I would say getting ready to learn about new tools, new knowledge, new industry, just with an open mind. That would be, the advice I will give to myself a couple years ago.
Piggybacking off of that, I think the biggest thing that I would have loved to have done earlier in my life is like learning how you learn, which is a really weird way, but like you're constantly going to be consuming new knowledge and new experiences and understanding like how you consume information the best and the fastest and the most efficiently is super important. Whether that's like you need to sit down with someone and ask people a bunch of questions, whether you like to take the information away and work through it yourself, learning how you like how you conceptualize and understand knowledge the fastest and the best for you is super important, because it will help kind of it'll help you put yourself in a position where you understand that, and so you can recognize it and hopefully succeed that way.
And just a plug for that, if you do figure that out, share that with whoever your manager is when you get your first job, because that is something like, as a manager, you're trying to figure that out. But if someone knows, like, I need notes, I need this in an email, don't tell me this over the phone, like, that's awesome. That's actually giving you a leg up that you now know that about yourself, because you're enabling your manager to help you be more successful. And it helps things go that much better right off the bat. So if you know that about yourself, like, definitely share that up front.
Brett?
Sure. I remember a lot of my classmates, and probably a lot of you, have a very specific job type or area, maybe region or city that you're looking in. I found it was, and maybe that is the end all be all for you, and that's okay. But I found it was a lot easier for me if I broadened both of those things, like not looking for exactly data scientists, but like a broad range of anything that could encompass that, or companies that could, like I said, it's like I've already adapted, like, or changed jobs here 3 times. And I know it sounds like everybody else on the call also has moved around quite a bit. So whatever you are looking for right now, just kind of broaden it, knowing that you can take steps to get to your ideal position in time. It might not happen right off that first one. And I think Shannon said it really well, that the first job is the hardest to get. I'm not saying just take any job, but get one that you can learn a lot at first, and always keep in the back of your mind that, hey, if you have a goal, go and make that happen in the next couple steps of the career, because it's just going to take some time sometimes. And be okay with that.
Alexa?
Yeah, so one thing I definitely want to mention is to try to live comfortably with your anxiety and your depressions. I think this is very important for international students like me back then. So when I was searching jobs during MSBA programs, of course, as I mentioned, the clock was ticking back then, so I was under a lot of pressures. And because of that, I don't think I was like the best version of myself, which couldn't really get me to, I guess, the best starting point of my career as I could be back then. And also right now, look back, like getting a job is just like such a little thing in one of the phases of your life. Like after that, you still have like a lot to deal with. Like for example, getting your H-1B, getting your green card. And even though right now, like I have my green card, I still have a lot of things to worry about. Like for example, how to make progress on your career, like how to pay off your mortgages, things like that. So dealing with anxiety and depressions, like from this day-to-day life stuff, is really like a lifelong journey, I guess. And don't let it, I guess, affect you too much to be, like I mentioned, like the best version of yourself.
Let me see. Donlin, did you say something?
Yeah, I did.
You did? Josh, everybody? Okay.
I guess one last final thought. You can take analytics and data out of your search for jobs, and you'll still come up with a bunch of jobs that do and use those things, because data and analytics is in basically every job. So don't limit yourself to just analytics jobs. It'll be everywhere.
Thank you everyone so much for participating today. It was so exciting to see a lot of familiar faces join today. And I'm so proud of each and every one of you.